Witness Us! The Lorehounds one-shot podcast begins now. I'm David.
I'm Elysia.
And I'm Aaron, and this is the Lorehounds coverage of Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. We've got our chrome spray ready.
So call out the war boys, because we're about to caravan across the vivid wasteland of George Miller's latest epic saga of the Gaspocalypse.
We'll start with our spoiler-free hot takes. For those of you not yet ready to pledge yourself to a Morton Joe, we'll give you a spoiler warning when it's time.
But this isn't the only campfire legend we're passing on this summer. It's officially the... And we've got all the citadels of summer fandom covered. At the end of the podcast, we'll go over our upcoming schedule and as well as what all of our affiliate podcasts are up to, including full coverage of The Acolyte, House of the Dragon, The Boys, Doctor Who, plus one-shots of The Bear, interview with the vampire, Alien Romulus, not to mention Rings of Power and Pachinko Seasons 2 for both of those coming out soon. It is hot lore summer.
This summer is so hot that we are going to need your help in the form of feedback and opinions about the cornucopia of content. Send emails to lorehounds@thelorehounds.com. Head to our website and use the contact form, or leave us a voicemail. The voicemail tool is simple to use, and we can drop your feedback right into the pod.
And if you like what we're doing and are interested in things like early episodes, extra movie reviews, insights, behind the scenes, etc., consider subscribing on Supercast or Patreon. Subscribers get early and ad-free versions of our podcasts, as well as a host of other benefits. We'll have more info about all that at the end of the podcast.
Also, join us on our Discord. We've got an awesome community, a great mod team, and different channels set up for all the different shows and projects we've got going on. Check the show notes for this podcast or any podcast and look for the Linktree link. It's got all the things, all the affiliates, all the websites, all the emails, etc., etc. Elysia, good to see you. Aaron from Radioactive Ramblings, welcome. I think this is our first official one-shot with you.
I think so, yeah. I think the only other official Lorehounds pod I've been on is the Hot Lore Summer pod, so I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Hot Lore Summer?
Hot Lore Summer. I don't want to... John loves the soundboard. I do too, but I'm going to try to...
Not as much as John.
I'm not going to try to, over nitrous, too much nitrous oxide in the engine is bad for it, so...
The NOS, man. You bring me back to my recent Fast and the Fury binge.
That's right. Elysia, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. It's been a busy podcasting Sunday. This is my second recording, and then there's going to be a whole bunch of editing.
As always. Well, I got you on this one, so because I know you've got other things going on.
Yeah.
How's the Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast going?
Yeah, good. We just finished the first pre-Acolyte blitz, so looking forward to doing the weekly breakdowns with John now and not putting out 2 of those a week.
Very cool. And Aaron, you're gearing up for The Boys season 4. Very cool.
Yeah, gearing up for The Boys. It's going to be a big one. I think they're dropping the first 3 episodes, so that'll be a busy week for us over at Radioactive Ramblings.
Mm-hmm. And that's you're gonna do that with Chase?
Yeah, so it'll be me, Chase, and potentially my other co-host Richard on a few of the episodes, but we'll see how the scheduling actually... Yes. We'll see how the scheduling actually shakes out for that.
That's good. Chase cracks me up. He seems very nice and sort of cordial in some ways, and then he'll just drop an F-bomb or throw some mud in your face, and it's cracks me up every time.
He's like that. He knows how to bully me like no other.
Funny. Cool. Well, we're here to talk about Furiosa. So before we get into our general takes, and then we'll take a break in a little bit before we get into the full spoilers, we have a huge outline. We've all been making a ton of notes in here. And this is a big franchise, right? It's got a lot of movies in it. So let's do a little bit of setup for the movie, a little production detail and background, and then we'll start talking about our general takes, our general hot takes. So a synopsis. As the world fell, young Furiosa is snatched from the green place of many mothers and falls into the hands of a great biker horde led by warlord Dementus. Sweeping through the wastelands, they come across the Citadel, presided over by the Immortan Joe. While the 2 tyrants war for dominance, Furiosa must survive many trials as she puts together the means for her to find her way home. So this is the 5th installment of the Mad Max franchise, all directed by George Miller, which I think is a singular accomplishment. I mean, he's had some co-directors here and there, but this is really his vision and his creativity. So we start out with Mad Max in 1979. Then what we've got rebranded or retitled Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior in 1981. I think in 81 it was just called The Road Warrior when we first got it. Then we have Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, famously with Tina Turner in 1985. And then we have a 30-year gap until we get Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga in 2024. And I'm sorry. Mad Max Fury Road. That's right. And I got these confused in 2015. My apologies, I got jumbled on my outline here. And then this is Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. There is talk of Mad Max The Wastelands as maybe a next project. I think there might have been a general agreement of a 3-package deal in success. So as the movies, however they do, we'll see. I know there's some questions about the box office on this one, but that's I think a separate issue around movies in general. So we'll see if we get any more future installments from George out of this. A couple of other production details. This was written by George Miller and Nick Lathouris, I believe is how to pronounce his last name. I'm not sure. And then it was directed by George Miller, and it's starring Anya Taylor-Joy, Chris Hemsworth, and Tom Burke. It had a budget of $168 million, and the opening weekend box office was a depressingly low $68 million.
I mean, it's only depressingly low because it's a big budget movie. It's a good box office otherwise.
Yeah, it is. It's a decent box office, and yeah, I mean, we could talk a lot about what's going on with movies and weekends. I mean, I can certainly say I wanted to see it opening weekend, but I just couldn't cut 2.5 hours of a holiday weekend from family time to actually go see it. If it had been an hour and a half, I would have been there for sure. But yeah, 2.5 is because you factor in it's like a 3-hour commitment. It's a huge chunk of time. Anyway. Separate issue. Over on Rotten Tomatoes, it's got a 90/90 critic to fan approval rating, so that's really strong. And Metacritic has a 79 score for the critics and a 7.2 for the fan rating. So pretty solid overall. I've seen a lot of folks who have a lot to say good about it with a lot of dots and buts, and if but not for this, it would have been epic. But let's start with our personal takes and a little bit of history, like throw in like how you came to the franchise. Aaron, since you are joining us for your first time, why don't you rev up your engine and get this war party started?
Yeah, so my personal history with Mad Max, the first time I had ever seen a Mad Max movie was Beyond the Thunderdome. I think it was on cable on some channel, and I really enjoyed that. Fury Road obviously came out in 2015, and there's actually a Mad Max game that also came out in 2015, which is supposed to be sort of in the timeline between Furiosa and Fury Road.
Something we didn't talk about was that in the franchise history, there's comic books and video games and a whole bunch of other secondary products in the marketplace.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that the game isn't considered canon anymore, or it wasn't ever possibly, but it's got a lot of cool tie-ins between both of these recent Mad Max movies, so there's a lot of cool details and recurring characters there.
Okay, cool. So cable rerun was your first exposure.
It was. Yeah.
Nice. Elysia, how about you?
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it was a movie. I always knew about the franchise, and like I vaguely had the idea. Like my dad was kind of a fan. I think I remember. He wasn't a fan enough that we watched it at home. Like we watched Star Wars at home and Dune at home and all this other stuff.
Uh-huh.
And
but
so
if it came on, you got to pause.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I experienced it.
Yeah,
I think the first time I experienced it was when I was in my 20s and out of the house, and because I remember talking to my dad, like, "Oh, I finally watched the Mad Max trilogy." And then I re-binged all of them, rewatched Fury Road before I went to see Furiosa, and also I got a plug later for Doomsday, personal pet love film of mine. But yeah, so I just got to rewatch it all. Mm-hmm.
Very cool. I've got a long history with the Mad Max franchise. Road Warrior was the first movie we saw, and I believe my friend Jimmy had it, his family structure were a bit more permissive with the VCR and rentals and that kind of stuff. So we saw it on tape, completely blew our minds. We loved every aspect of the show. We loved the violence. We loved the gore. We loved the wacky mohawk, screaming nature of it, the feral child, like absolutely everything. It dominated our mythology as young kids in middle school age. And then when we found out that there was a prequel, that was amazing. And so we rented that, and we would watch them back to back. And Mad Max is what it is as a movie of its time. But I remember when we discovered that there was a prequel, it felt very underground, like we were getting a bootleg tape of something, like we had access to, we were seeing inside of a world that I was like, oh my God, did you realize that they made there was a previous movie? No way. Oh, right. And so that was all very cool. At that age, we were just getting into tabletop games and tabletop role-playing games. And so Car Wars by Steve Jackson Games was a huge thing that we played a lot of times if we weren't sitting down for a session of Gamma World or Top Secret, or, I think we had moved on from Dungeons and Dragons by that time, but Car Wars and Boat Wars were huge in our mythology. And we had the Mad Max mythos to fuel it all. And then I think when Thunderdome came out, it just felt like a kind of cynical cash grab to us at that stage. It didn't make a lot of sense from a mythology standpoint for us. And
I love Thunderdome.
I'm just reflecting as a kid in 1985.
No, I get it.
Yeah. And I watched it last night, so we can talk about it later. And then Fury Road comes out, and that feels like a return to form, but then just completely amped up. And I'm a little mixed on Fury Road. There's a lot that I love. Then there's also some stuff that on rewatches I'm like, I'm not sure if I love this or not. But anyway, so I've got a long, deep history with the franchise. It played a pretty important part in my formation as a kid in middle school. Aaron, why didn't you give us some of your hot takes, spoiler free?
Sure. So I guess I'll start off with my hottest take of all. This movie wasn't missing a single thing by not having Max in it.
Oh, yeah.
I think that now it's time that we can maybe tell some more stories in this world without him and just get a little bit more of the universe,
Right.
I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts on that? Did you feel like it was missing something with?
I thought that this was a million times better in terms of lore and things than Fury Road. Fury Road, my hot take is that I don't love Fury Road. I think it's a visual spectacle and a stunt achievement, and I appreciate it on that level, but nothing happens. They just literally go somewhere and go back again, and it just seems so shallow and superficial. And this movie actually explored the mythology, actually created this new world of this new film series, which seems distinct from the original somewhat, timeline-wise, at least.
Absolutely. I agree. I guess another one of my hot takes is that I loved that this movie, just like other Mad Max movies, is not afraid to include these utterly ridiculous set pieces. The world is so goofy and ridiculous in the best way possible.
Yeah. That's true. And that's a through line in the entire, even going back to the original Mad Max, even with the toe cutter and the Knight Rider and all that stuff. It's just over the top gonzo. Right. Yeah. And that is part of it. That's just deep within the DNA of this franchise.
Yeah. That's what people love. Right. Yeah. Well, that's why the original Mad Max is my least favorite, actually.
Yeah, the original Mad Max is, it's an interesting story, and in its creation and in development and its on screen, it is definitely a creature of its time.
Yeah, and but it's more like a prototype of what comes after.
Yes, yeah, and said very early, because his intentions of making that first movie were very different, and they pivoted, but they didn't completely pivot, and so. Until they get to the Road Warrior stuff, does it get to the gonzo craziness? So, and I think that's why for us when we were kids, when we discovered there was this origin story to Max that was a little bit more sane and a little bit normal.
Right.
At least for us at that time, it had a kind of logic and it made sense why this subsequent world was in Road Warrior is even more crazy. Like we could see the beginnings of it, in those early stages.
Yeah. Whenever it comes to post-apocalyptic stuff, I always enjoy seeing like the fall of civilization itself. And so the first Mad Max movie scratches that itch for me.
Right.
Yeah. Right. This movie also had a lot of religious symbolism in it, especially with the costume design. Everything had meaning behind it. It was very cool. I enjoyed it a lot.
Laden with symbolism.
Yes.
You can tell they spend a lot of time in world building in these movies, especially in the most recent two. But I just want to see, I love luxuriating in the world building. So give me all the details. Like I'm still obsessed with my favorite part of Fury Road is when they drive past those people on the stilts in the swamp. And I'm still waiting for the story of those swamp people.
Right. Like, wait, what is that?
Yeah.
Wait, tell me about that. And I think that's one of the things that I appreciate about George Miller's world building is that like from what I understand, this script was born out of the backstory that they created for Furiosa, just so they understood who this character was. They created this whole world of who is Furiosa? Where did she come from? And then they were like, "Oh, hey, we've got a movie here. We got a script in this backstory. Like, let's do something with it." So I love that he really is exploring, and I like the post-apocalyptic start as not, "Oh, there was a nuclear war." Like the nuclear war came later in the sequence of events, and it really started with conflict over oil as a natural resource. So. Yeah. It's thought, and he's built into the world and into the mind. This, it's not just apocalypse, nuclear war. It's not simple. It's actually got some dimension to it.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of why I like. One of the things I like about Road Warrior over the original Mad Max 2 is that you get that scene setting. You get a bit of information about what world you're in.
Right. That's right. We were actually scheduled to record this podcast the other day, but then we got delayed for various reasons. And I kind of am glad that we got that because then I was able to, I was like, whatever the day was going on. And I was like, well, I've got some time on my hands. Let me just watch Road Warrior really quick. And then I was like, okay, well, let me watch Thunderdome tonight. I've got nothing else to pressing to watch. And so I was able to get to both. And I had forgotten about in the Road Warrior how they have that whole setup where they play a bunch of old film, newsies reels and talk about how the world gets set up.
Yeah, because they based the foundation of it in a real historical gas shortage in the 70s, and then just said, "What if that didn't get fixed, but that went worse?"
Yeah, I have dim memories of that as a child. When long gas lines and just the whole, it fed into a whole thing about around the 70s and what was going on. So
but there's crazy with the crazy inflation going on too, right?
Inflation and stuff with Iran and Jimmy Carter and put on a sweater.
And Vietnam, of course,
Vietnam, we're still resolving out of that. A lot of labor relation stuff, the rise of corporate control. Yeah. Which is something I just recorded a podcast with Ron Dawson, one of our other co-hosts, and we're talking about it's the 45th anniversary of the Alien movie. And one of the things that I found really interesting is on reflection is why that movie is so potent. And I think it's similar to this movie in some ways, is that the structures of society are being addressed in a way. And in Alien, it goes into labor relationships and corporate control that's remote and removed, and you have white collar and blue collar, and everybody's sort of suffering under the thumb of this and this corporate control, which I think in the 70s is something that we're really dealing with. And then this series of movies is energy and resource consumption, right? And the shortages and scarcity and what happens, how thin is society's veneer before we descend into kind of madness. So I think one of the things that gives a franchise or a film and a franchise lasting power is that it's drawing a line or highlighting or addressing real sociological issues.
Well, so this is my question about the state of the franchise with this. It's famously, I understand for listeners at home, I understand these are campfire stories. This is, not to be taken literally every detail. It's real.
Right.
They're legends.
Right.
But so we have the second film, Fury Road, Road Warrior. Road Warrior gives us like this, okay, so the gas situation is such, and then it went badly, and this is what happened. And then when we get to Thunderdome, then in Thunderdome, they say, well, after that, it actually escalated to nuclear war. So now that's why we've destroyed the planet with a nuclear war now. But all that was happening back in like the 70s and 80s and 90s. So now in the new timeline, is that still the origin story, or is there a different one? Have they said?
I don't know. I haven't done that level of research to understand how the timeline is flowing out or what George has said specifically about that. I think there is some information about that. But the way that I've been relating to this just for personally, and I don't know if this works for other people, it's kind of like the James Bond franchise. It doesn't matter, right?
Right,
The characters are ageless. The missions don't necessarily relate to each other. I mean, I think with the Daniel Craig movies, they tried to create a more continuity in the storyline. So this movie is a result to, is because this happened.
That had decent continuity. It had other problems, but
but if you go back to the Sean Connery and Roger Moore years, it didn't matter. It was just bottle things. And to me, that works for the Mad Max franchise. Like, let's just tell stories in this world. And whether he's got the V8 Interceptor or not, I don't really care.
Yeah.
Like, tell me a cool story.
Yeah.
So.
Bad Elysia brain, turn off. Yeah.
Well, I think but we have to be careful because there are so many franchises that do want to give us a cohesive narrative structure.
Well, it's something that my brain craves, and that's why I enjoy Mad Max.
That's why you do the Star Wars time.
Yes, because I'm obsessing about those details. Yeah. And so that's why for me, the Mad Max franchise will always be one that I enjoy because it's bonkers and I like bonkers things. But it's always going to like itch at my brain somewhere.
Right. How does this fit? How do these puzzle pieces fit? Yeah. Aaron, anything else that you want to touch on with hot takes?
Yeah, I was just going to say I'm a real stickler for the timeline as well. I need to know where everything fits in. So in my own headcanon, I'm trying to make sense of everything.
Right.
In my head, everything is taking place in the original timeline, like the 80s and 90s and stuff. That's where I try to fit it in.
Because you're also digging into the Fallout timeline lore along with the games and everything like that. And I'm guessing that's got a more cohesive structure. From the original, like from the start, like they created a timeline.
Yeah, they had a fairly solid timeline from the beginning in that franchise.
Right.
Yeah.
Where this franchise was just like, hey, I got this idea because I'm a doctor and I want to make a movie about road carnage, and then it turns into something else, and then the studios are like, throw money at it, and then the studios are like, throw more money at it.
Yeah.
And then, as I understand it, George had. I don't know how the rights went to, I believe it to Warner Brothers, but then he won the rights back in a lawsuit. And so now he owns the franchise himself. And so that is a very unique situation. And so that's one of the reasons why we have a 30-year gap in between Thunderdome and Fury Road. And I believe it was Jodie Foster who made some complaints, and it was kind of a defamation thing. And so he sued the studio or said, I'm going to sue you guys. And then so they negotiated out. And one of the things that he was able to negotiate back was his rights to the movie, to the franchise. So, and again, I haven't read all that. I've just heard that, sort of secondhand. So, but that's a pretty unique position to be in, to own your own, franchise in this day and age. So we'll see what he does.
I hope he gets to make another film. Maybe, I don't know if it's going to be. It's just such like a shame that the narrative around these opening weekends really dictates the perception,
right.
Because this is not a bad opening weekend by any measure. It was number one. It's just not what it used to be But I have to say, it's not so different from Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. But then people were like, oh, but Kingdom opened really great. And it's just how it's perceived.
Right.
But of course, yeah, if I have to choose which franchise gets more movies, I'm choosing Kingdom.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. So I guess for me, overall, I thought the movie was, and this I think goes into the box office question too, is that it was good, not great for me. And it's been interesting listening to all the different reactions. I listened to a number of mainline podcasts, I think Slate and NPR's things. I listened to the Ringer coverage, both on the Big Pick and the Midnight Boys. And it's been interesting to hear, and then of course in our own community and our own Discord, hearing different people's takes on this. And whenever there's a divergence of opinion, I always find that interesting. Like where there's like a percentage, maybe a majority that is like, oh yeah, we loved it, and then there's like a significant minority that didn't or had problems with it. There's no universal. It was great or it was terrible. So I don't feel bad saying that it was good, not great.
Mm-hmm.
And a common refrain, and I'm just like everybody else. It was too long, and by the time by the time there's certain things happened, I was kind of exhausted because it's such a high intensity movie. But I do really appreciate the change in form and the change in tone and the level, like you said, Alicia. There's more story to this story, and there's actual story as opposed to just chase, and so that was kind of fun to see the world expand in that way. I really like that.
Can I ask you?
Go for it.
Someone said that they think that it should have been a mini series on TV with each chapter as an episode. Would you guys have preferred that?
I don't know. Aaron, what do you think? Do you have a take on that? I'm still processing.
I think they could have just made the movie a little bit shorter. I don't know if I really needed
a 10 episode or 8 episode.
You don't want that story over 5 weeks or whatever it was.
Yeah, I don't think it could have held my attention for 5 weeks. Maybe if they dropped it as a binge, it would have been something I could sit and watch all in one day. But I think they could have just made the movie a little bit shorter, and that would have been sufficient.
All right.
It's like eating like neon colored cotton candy, right? And if you eat too much or you take too long to eat it, you're kind of like, oh my Lord. So, because it is so stimulating, and if you see it in a big theater or whatever, it's a lot. So, and then I've got some issues that we're going to talk about later with the cinematography and with some of the action. So. Van Lathan on the Midnight Boys podcast said this, and I think it was Sub-Zero on our Discord who reposted it, which reminded me of it, which is this movie, and I totally agree with this summation. This movie, the parts are greater than the sum. I loved almost every set piece and on every bit, but then bringing it all together, it exhausted me. And so when certain things happened that could have really knocked my socks off. By that time, I was just like, please, can I go home now? So that's and like you, Alicia, I think I'm excited for him to see more, and I want to see him play with the form like he did with this, and do something a little bit different, right? Take it a little bit further.
And the next movie should just be called Swamp Stilts.
Very cool. So with our one-shot movie outlines, one of the things that we're doing is putting in some different features that will, kind of jump from episode to episode. So one of the things I'm always curious about is people's theater experience. And the first question I have is big screen, small screen. Would you recommend folks go out and see this in the big screen, or should they wait for VOD, for payment on VOD, PVOD? As they say, as the kids say.
I mean, I think, this is a big screen movie. This is a big screen franchise, especially the new ones.
Yeah. So you would say go out and see it on the big screen.
Yeah. I 100%. Saw it on Dolby, and that was right. Good. Oh, it was a little loud, actually. It was it was like my third Dolby experience since my ear injury. And this one I did have to cover my ears a few times.
How was your movie theater experience? Was it packed house?
No, it wasn't. Although it was a Sunday afternoon, which is, but I was surprised how not packed it was. It was also like.
Did you see it opening weekend?
No, I didn't see it opening. I saw it, I think I did see it opening weekend. But on
you
Sunday.
must have. Yeah. Okay. What about you, Aaron? How was your movie going experience? Anything of note from where you saw it or how you saw it?
Yeah, so I would probably, if I had to do it over again, I would wait for the small screen.
Oh, really?
I did.
Okay.
Also saw it in Dolby, so the sound quality was really fun to hear the engines roaring and all of that when I was in the theater. I did see it at 10:30 in the morning, so it was the theater had maybe 2 other people in it, which is very rare where I am. I go to the AMC in Georgetown, so it's always packed most of the time.
Right.
And yeah, it was a lot quieter than I'm used to, but it was a fun overall theater experience.
Right. I saw it later this week with a buddy of mine. I think we saw it Thursday night, and it was on the big screen of our local theater, which is like our town's main amphitheater stage performance space. It's got zodiac symbols painted on the ceiling and statues of, Greco-Roman statues in the corners of things, and people pouring water from vases and stuff. So it's a fun space to see it in. I think there's about 7 other people there, and me and my buddy, which is also amazing. Shout out to Joe that we could actually coordinate, 2 busy dads, and we were able to coordinate our schedule this one night of the week to actually go see a movie together. But I think I mentioned before, 3 hours is a huge chunk of time to cut out from your day. And I think that's also, again, a chief complaint. The movie was a bit too long. I am 50-50 on big screen, small screen. If you've got a really good setup and you've got some good surround sound and you've got a nice screen at home, I could say, oh yeah, I could see the case for staying home for that one. But if you're nearby a big, laser or Dolby, IMAX, 70 millimeter, whatever the top qualities are, and with good sound, definitely I could recommend a matinee showing, maybe with the discounted pricing a little bit or something like that, because it really is a visual feast, and it is also a feast for your ears. And to our theater, it's got a big screen, and it's pretty good. The sound is just okay. It's not full surround. And I was really missing that feeling the engine rumbling in my seats kind of stuff. I really did miss having that immersive experience. So if we had a theater that was higher quality, I might have even delayed even a little bit further to see it. So, right. Analytics. So we also like to, I forgot one other question for a theater going experience. Any trailers of note? I had no we had no trailers on
Oh, really?
Movie. Yeah. We often don't, or sometimes we get 1 or 2 or none. Oftentimes there are no trailers at our theater, which is really weird. So you got to be there on time. Yeah. You can't screw around.
I don't remember. I mean, I remember every time I go to the theaters, an average of once a week. And every time for the past 3 months, there's a Bad Boys trailer. And now I'm I do not want to see this movie. I don't want to know this movie exists. I'm just so sick of that trailer. So I remember that. I remember there was a Deadpool and Wolverine, but there was some more. I don't remember what they were. Because I was with someone. Shout out to Alyssa. So we got
a voicemail from her.
Yeah. So we got there early, but I don't remember what the other trailers were anymore. Do you remember, Aaron?
I got to the theater a little bit late, so all I got to see was the Deadpool and Wolverine trailer, and then Nicole Kidman started doing her speech and the movie started. So.
I've never gotten to see that, but I've heard so many cultural references to it.
Yes.
That's funny. And last question on theater going experience. Are you going to be watching this again on streaming soon? When it first comes out on streaming?
No.
If someone I'm hanging out with wants to watch it, I might watch it a little bit sooner, but on my own, I probably won't be watching it again for a little while.
Got it. Okay, cool.
But it is, of the 5 movies, there's 3 of them that I am more keen on rewatching, and this is one of them. So right, okay. Basically, the original and Fury Road, I'm fine if I never see them again. But
right. Yeah, I wish I had gotten Fury Road in before we had recorded this to complete my thing. So I'm not sure when Furiosa comes out on streaming. Yeah, I don't know that I'm going to put it in a priority rewatch. That's not something I'm going to rush to see. It's going to be rewatched at some point. I just don't, not urgently.
Yeah.
So. All right. So the last thing we'll do before we take our break and then get into the full spoiler discussion is we have a few analytic frameworks that we like to kick around here. We've got the Shippey test, which measures against original material versus adaptation onto screen. We've got the Sanderson slider, which again is inspiration versus adaptation. But then we have and I don't think either of those apply in this case.
No.
We have the Pukila scale for violence. That's a relative measure of violence from season 1 of Rings of Power. Would our favorite Tolkien scholar, Marilyn Pukila, would she watch this or not? Like, is the violence too much or too, or
isn't Rings of Power +1 or is Rings of Power 0?
I think it was Rings of Power 0.
Okay.
Yeah. That's my assumption. Aaron, that's right? You made the cool visual graphic for it. So.
On the graph, the Rings of Power is at a 0. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Then you guys both have a +3 for this, but I would put it as, I think, because that's the thing, because then she said that Marilyn, who the scale's named after, she said at one point that, what's it called? Clockwork Orange was a +5. So now I don't think Clockwork Orange is that actual, they talk about violence more than you actually see violence. So I would rate this above Clockwork Orange.
Really?
Wow. I mean, I think this is more violent than Clockwork Orange. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I mean, it's got a lot of kinetic violence, and this is one of the things about the Pukila test, right? There's always these subjective elements, like psychological horror versus body horror, and then that makes me think right now.
This is body horror for sure in this one,
and the kinetic violence of car crashes and trucks smashing into things, and so there's a lot of which doesn't necessarily have bodies involved in it, but like, physical objects in the world being smashed together. So that's another kind of sub-violence. So that's an interesting thought. Anyway, yeah, I gave it a +3. Aaron, I think you're 3.5, leaning 4.
Yeah. This one was a tough one for me because I kept grappling back and forth. I was like, ooh, the violence is a little bit cartoonish at some points, but it's also very graphic while being cartoonish. So yeah, this was a hard one to read for me.
And we'll talk about it later. I'm curious, too, as to what your guys' read on it, because the violence towards women seemed like I noticed the absence of it, whereas in a lot of these movies, sometimes there's a misogynistic violence that's going on, and I didn't notice it in this one. So, but we can talk about it in the spoiler section. And the last test is the Lopez test, and this is from the True Detective season 4. Does a body of work fall within? It's basically a pass-fail. Fall within its franchise environs, and I would say that this totally passes as a Mad Max franchise without much question. You guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of the pinnacle in a way because it. Yeah, that it brings together. You can see that he's had time to reflect on all of his various movies, and this brings together so many elements that made the prior movie stand out, like the best of Thunderdome, the best of
right. Yeah, that's a good point.
Road Warrior. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, he's definitely drawing on all the elements from the world for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Without anything else, I think we'll take a quick break. And then when we get back, we'll start to take the movie apart down to its pieces and then see if we can rebuild ourselves a war rig or not. And we are back. Okay, let's start talking about the movie in detail. We've got a huge outline here, lots of things to talk about. Aaron, I'm going to throw it to you to just pick anything, anywhere, pick a starting point, and then we can just start to flow through our discussion. So what's sort of at the top of your mind of things that you want to dig into?
Ooh, I wanted to start with everyone's favorite set pieces because...
Okay, nice.
Yeah, I really loved the battle at the Bullet Farm.
Okay.
I thought that was so much fun with Dementis trying to hide away from Anya Taylor-Joy with the sniper rifle, and it was very tense, and I thought that the action scenes in that moment were very cool.
Nice. Elysia, what's your favorite set piece?
I don't know if like I necessarily have. I guess I like in terms of what really looked cool. I loved when her mom showed up with. She had taken the skull hat and just like came in like a badass and on her motorcycle. I was mostly drawn to the character moments, which is one reason why I like this film a lot better than Fury Road as well. So little things that I keep thinking about, like when she and her mentor turned lover, I guess, were leaning against each other at the end before his death. And like, that's the only goodbye they got to exchange, the only I loved you. But that was all they needed.
Praetorian Jack. Yeah.
Yeah, Praetorian Jack. Yeah. So he stands shoulder to shoulder like that. And then, yeah, like the fate of Dementis with the tree. And this is the stuff that sticks in my head.
Right. I think my favorite set piece was the opening because it did something a little bit different in that, by and large, it was smart people doing smart stuff. And one of the things that drives me nuts about sometimes these action set pieces is smart people, what are otherwise smart people, do dumb stuff. And you're like, wait, why did you run that way? You should have run the other way. Obviously, we have the perspective of being omniscient observers and having, time to think about these things. But I just really liked that the sequence with her mother, and then even Furiosa as a kid, just constantly doing smart things, biting the fuel line, and in the tent, taking advantage of the distractions and stuff. I think the one thing she didn't do was like she didn't do anything to stop the other mother, like tie her hands up or something like that, and so she was able to tell her on her right away. But still, all of that sequence was pretty interesting, and it really brought me right into the world immediately with what was going on. I don't know what if we needed in terms of set pieces. I don't know if we needed the war rig montage. I don't know if that was one of the pieces that we probably could have cut. The building of the war rig. I felt like that was a little bit of time we could have saved. It seemed to be a little bit of a distraction, but all the other set pieces I thought were good into themselves. But then, as we talked before, just like there's so many of them, it's a little bit much. Yeah. Let's quickly pivot to you brought up the tree already, Elysia. And this made me think about one of the themes of the movie of revenge. My buddy Joe said, "Oh, well, this reminded me a lot of Kill Bill 2 or Kill Bill, story in the terms of this relentless revenge story." And I thought about this, which is there a difference between vengeance and revenge? And then what did Furiosa gain by not just outright killing Dementis?
Yeah. That sense of vengeance, you mean? That it's not just about, it's about like torturing him.
Right. Is there a difference between revenge and vengeance?
But is it, I can see, I'm not a violent person, I swear, even though I do consume a lot of violent media.
Exactly.
But I do wonder, he has twice robbed her. He's robbed her of the two most important people in her life in horrific ways and made her watch. She watched her mother burn alive, and then she watched her lover, mentor, dragged to death.
Were they lovers? That's a
I don't know.
question.
I don't know that's because it is a little like grooming with the age she was picked up, but it did feel like at the end they definitely had some sort of very intimate relationship, not necessarily sexual, but intimate.
Did either of you watch The Queen's Gambit?
Yes.
Yes.
So one of the things I really appreciated about that and appreciate about Anya Taylor-Joy as an actor as well in her portrayal is that Queen's Gambit didn't sink down into any kind of
trope
around women and violence towards women and what. It was a hero's journey. Right. It was straight. It was clean. She descended. She dealt with her own struggles, and she came back after hearing the call, and she brought knowledge to the people and all that kind of stuff. And it was just they played it straight. And the whole time I was watching the Queen's Gambit, I'm just waiting for some creepy groomery, violence-y thing to happen to her, and it never did. And I was so relieved. I was like, oh, thank God. See, we can do this. We can tell stories in this way without, doing it. And I thought that this movie also did that. They didn't need to make a sexual relationship explicit between Praetorian Jack and her. They didn't need. She was accepted as an imperator, right, which is a commander, and Praetorian means. What I've got a note in here. What Praetorian means as well. But it's like a soldier.
The Praetorian Guard was they were the ones who guarded the emperor. Yeah.
Right. And an imperator is a commander or like a general or, something like that. And they, she was accepted, even though we've got Immortan Joe with his creepy, bride situation. At least, Furiosa was regarded by people as having a function and command, even though she did hide her gender for quite a long time.
Right.
But when she reveals herself, everybody's like, "Oh, cool! Right? She's a badass."
What I always think about with the relationship between her and the other Praetorian Jack, was that right? Praetorian Jack or Joe? Sorry, Jack.
Jack, yeah, Praetorian Jack, yeah.
Is that Dementis said afterwards, I've never seen two people fight so hard for each other. And that's why it doesn't really matter what the nature of their relationship is. It's just that they were basically each other's whole world. In this awful world, that was the one person that each of them trusted.
And that great scene when she begins to start to walk the long empty road back. And then he shows up and he says, look, I can offer you something. And then she's, he offers to keep the weapon as a sign of trust. Right. I thought that was a really, really great turn. That little pistol, knife, brass knuckle thing is a real thing. It's called a pepper box. There's a great website called the Internet Movie Firearm Database, and you can put in any movie and it lists all of the weapons that are in there. And that was a real thing, but it was a token of her, his esteem. He's like, hey, you can trust me because you can keep that weapon. Which I also found it interesting that he gave her a sawed-off double-barreled shotgun, which is Max's weapon of choice from the original Road Warrior and Mad Max movies. So,
I mean, maybe they seem to draw a lot of parallels with her and him.
Max. Mm-hmm. Right, but where he chooses to be a wandering, not being detached from society, she's attaching herself to society.
Right.
Yeah, she's attaching herself to society a little bit for her own gain so that she can accomplish her personal goals of, eventually overthrowing Immortan Joe and Fury Road. But she definitely has goals in mind when she is doing everything. There was never a moment where I was like, why is she doing what she's doing, which is pretty common in action movies like this, where I'm wondering what's going on. Right.
I was a little confused by Praetorian Jack's introduction because suddenly he was just there, and I was like, "Wait, what?" The movie felt long, but also at the same time there were key sequences or connectivity parts that I felt missing that I wanted more from, and in some ways I wanted more Praetorian Jack and Furiosa scenes together where they were.
It hurt me when he died, but of course he had
to. Right. Yeah. Tom, do you guys know Tom Burke? I don't know. I don't recognize him at all. The actor
I looked him up, and he was in one thing that I previously knew, but now I can't even remember what it was. But he did such a good job in this that I immediately left the theater and was like, "Who is that?"
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never seen him in anything else, but I hope that now that he's gotten a little bit of exposure in this, maybe we'll start seeing him in some other projects, because I thought he did a fantastic job in this film.
Did you guys catch that Valkyrie, the girl that she left at the beginning when they were picking fruits? That is the same character in Fury Road that she meets up again with when they go to try to go back to the green place.
Yeah, I had that pointed out to me, but I did not pick it up myself. Yeah.
I didn't pick it up until I was, doing research and, trying to read some stuff and read up on characters. Then I was like, oh, wait, I had two different Google pages on with the Furiosa and Fury Road. I was like, wait, Valkyrie? Oh, wait. Oh, that's very cool. That was a very cool little, connection there. And that's why she was so great, when in Fury Road, when they reconnect, why there's such a vibe in their connection, right? That they're happy to see each other.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of details where if I go back and watch Fury Road sometime soon, I'm going to find it a lot more enjoyable than I did the first time because of all the setup work that Furiosa does.
Right. For sure. What did we how are we on Furiosa's arc here? I mean, obviously it's a prequel, so we're connecting her to a known place. Did it work for you guys? Did the rail lines meet up appropriately? There wasn't too much of a hitch?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was a little bit confused at first. They spent a lot more time with Child Furiosa than I thought that they would during her story arc, which I didn't dislike. I really enjoyed all the parts where she was a kid, which was kind of surprising to me. I thought I was going to be sitting there waiting, like, when are we going to get to Anya Taylor-Joy as Furiosa? But I enjoyed both portrayals equally. So
what you're telling us is that you would be down for a miniseries?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, it was a long time with Child Furiosa, and then a long time with Teen Furiosa, right? We had 3 kind of distinct ages with her, and we spent a long time in childhood.
Yeah, no, I was very surprised by that, but the younger version did a great job. She killed it.
She really did. I didn't note her name as the actor's name, but she did a great job. That's for sure. So
I think Elisa did in her voicemail.
Okay, very cool. So speaking of characters, I don't know. I love all the wacky names in the Mad Max universe and franchise. But I got a question for you guys. Who wore it better, Humongous from Road Warrior or Dementis as our chief protagonist? Because we get introduced to Immortan Joe and his clan, but it's really about Dementis. And so much of Dementis for me is rooted in the Humongous character from Road Warrior 2.
Well, not to upset Edna, the costume designer from Invincible, but Dementis is the cape. He is the color-changing cape.
I enjoyed Dementis much more as a villain than I enjoyed Humongous. He felt more like a real person, a real character. Even though he was not as intimidating. I don't think that Chris Hemsworth was very intimidating as Dementis, even though he was supposed to be scary. Yeah.
But he was doing bad things though, so.
Yes, he was still doing awful things, and you can see how he would terrorize people, but something about Chris Hemsworth, I can't look at him without feeling a little bit like he's goofy, you know? He's got that sense of humor to him.
Yeah.
And his performance it's one of the most chatty of the Mad Max characters. And I think this goes into some of how George Miller, when he started with this franchise, part of his idea was, I need this to be able to play. We don't have any budget. So I need this to be able to play international. And I need to do this without doing a lot of translation or subtitle work. And so he just really tried to use the screen to tell the story with minimal dialogue. And so we're used to a lot of not dialogue. I guess, I don't know. I wonder how Denis Villeneuve feels about a George Miller film with his famous quote about dialogue versus screen, because I think in a lot of ways, George Miller is doing that precisely.
I really miss the dialogue and story in Fury Road, though. In this one, I think it was, but there was some great lines. Like probably my favorite thing in the movie is the speech Dementis gives at the end.
I totally agree with you. And I was so frustrated by the filmmaking, because by the time we got to that scene, I was exhausted and I couldn't take in what Hemsworth was saying, and there were so many great lines, and I was like, wait, what? And every time I caught up with a line, he let out another one, and I just got lost in it. But I loved the character arc of Dementis of being, he's like, yeah, we've all lost, and this is how I'm dealing with it, and this is, where I've gotten to. And he's so self-reflective about it in some kind of refreshing way. I don't know.
Yeah, and they include his loss and his sadness into his character design as well. You've got the teddy bear that belonged to his kids before the fall of civilization that he keeps on him at all times.
Right.
And he gave that to Furiosa at one point. Which was a huge gesture for him, I think. I think he thought that he had a real bond with Furiosa, and
until it eventually...
Yes, exactly. I think that he thought more of their relationship than they actually were, up until the point when it wasn't beneficial for him anymore, or he had some other reason to benefit from selling her to Immortan Joe.
Right. Interesting, when I watched Road Warrior the other day, and there's a scene where Humongous is taking out his pistol and loading in. There's a couple of scenes where he's opening the lacquered box. And you can see on the lid of the box, there's a picture of a man standing in uniform with a woman and some medals. And so I think George Miller is always building the three-dimensionality of these characters and sort of, where they've come from.
Right.
And so I think Humongous had backstory, but we were just given the spectacle of Humongous. Whereas with Hemsworth, he actually, as you said, Alicia, that we actually get to spend some time with him and learn, and he actually has dialogue, so we can actually understand him a little bit more.
And it was also cool to see the Citadel from his outsider perspective, to have him roll up and be like, "Ooh, I'm just going to take this place. I'm here. We got our whole routine." And they're like, "Oh, your routine's cute. Let's just go have someone quick kill himself to show you what you're up against."
Right. Yeah. That little bit was pretty funny too. Like pick a war boy, and he's like, "Not you, the one to the right." That was pretty funny. I did have a Mandela moment in this movie where I thought the mic that Dementus was using was the same one that same kind of style and model that Humongous was using, but no, it turns out that they were totally different. But I had it in my mind that they were the same. Right. So there was a point that you brought up about that we were starting to talk about with Praetorian Jack and Furiosa, and this idea of the master-apprentice relationship. Certainly, we're going to be dealing with that with the Acolytes, and that's a huge cornerstone of the Star Wars world. I think even Fallout, which you were covering, there's not so much master-apprentice, but there's a squire, knight-squire relationship.
Yeah, the relationship in that is a little bit more hateful and envious, but it's for sure a theme in that a little bit too.
Right. Yeah, I really appreciated the master-apprentice relationship in that Praetorian Jack wasn't ever, I don't know, he related to her in a really different way that I thought was refreshing. And he saw her potential. He saw the utility value of having a partner like that, but he was also freely giving her the training and the experience. He seemed kind of cool too, because he was even like, I know it was a little bit of a setup with the war boys, but he's like, "Yeah, jump in. You can drive the war rig." Like, he seemed as a master who's teaching other people, and he actually was committed to the idea of sharing his knowledge and elevating other people, which I thought was a bit different in these kinds of circumstances.
Yeah, I like that they had more of that they had like this storytelling tradition in. Like, it seems like Dementus was a showman, but I like that they had. And I was trying to look up the title of the guy with the tattoos all over his face, because apparently
History Men.
Yeah, History Men. Yeah.
Apparently that's a thing from the comics. And yeah, I thought that was a really cool touch. And that kind of made me almost root for their group in a way, even though they're just as bad as the others. Obviously, they killed Furiosa's mom. She would consider them even more bad, I guess.
Yeah, every time the History Man opened up his mouth, I was listening very closely. I love those types of wise characters. It's such a cliche, but the old man who knows everything is such a great trope in my mind.
And between this guy and Jessica and Dune, I apparently like some text on face tattoos.
Yes.
One of our regular recurring elements of our one-shots is comparisons, or, if we want to be a little less kind, spot the trope. But that was totally one of mine. was Dune 2 was certainly in the sand and the desert, but then certainly History Man with the writing on his face. Not a direct comparison, just a little. It was just a little element to that.
But I think the difference between them is History Man believes, he drinks his own Kool-Aid, and Jessica is like purely putting on a show.
That's a good point.
Yeah. This movie felt a little bit like training wheels for Anya Taylor-Joy to be in Dune 3.
Fair call. Well, hopefully History Man is drinking Kool-Aid and not other liquid substances in the wastelands. So I noticed your comment here, Aaron. Love seeing Immortan Joe, Dementis, Valkyrie, and then some guy just named Jack.
That's why he's Praetorius Jack. Well, I love how there's I saw this in pretty close succession with Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and there's also a character in that movie who's obsessed with the Roman Empire. I'm like, it's just like that TikTok meme. How often do these characters think about the Roman Empire?
Yeah, Immortan Joe is definitely living the Roman Empire for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
By the way, did you go
ahead, please. Did
you guys know about the story about, so I loved the bit, there was the war boy, like literal boy, he was in the back with the bombing knocker thing. Right, and they even, and I love, like, for instance, at one point they just show a character he's like, bombing knocker time? Like, not yet. And so they show him like hanging out, spraying the stuff on his hand, like, just like being a kid. And then he dies. And that actually really hit me. Like, that's the only war boy in this movie I cared about dying. But the boy, his name is Creighton Bales. He's Australian. I guess they mostly are. And he is a form of dwarfism, and he was bullied at school. So George Miller found out and put him in this movie.
Oh, that's very cool. Nice.
Very cool.
Yeah, I gotta love the Australian names for things, right? Bobby Knocker, like, that's just fact.
Yeah. Did it feel out of place to anyone else that Anya Taylor-Joy did not attempt the Australian accent in her portrayal of Furiosa?
She's from a different place. She's from the green place with many mothers.
True. That's very true. They must have dropped the Australian accent over in the green place.
Maybe that's why they didn't have her speak much.
Maybe. There you go. That's a good point.
But Charlize Theron didn't either, right? I mean,
she didn't have
South African, but
she played it straight. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I noticed one thing too with Anya Taylor. Well, with the Furiosa character, they made a big deal of the star map on her arm, and then when she loses her arm, which I thought was a great cutaway, when they just show her arm hanging there, like she did this, on purpose. That was like, okay, badass moment. But that they didn't do a lot of follow-up work with the star map. So if you weren't, there was so much to track. But in this, they just sort of like, oh wait, that was it. It never, I don't know, it never played again. And I don't know, did you guys notice that? Did they click that, or should there have been more? I kind of feel like there should have been more.
I guess it was sort of, it was symbolic. I took it as, in a way, she was so connected to her home, and that was the moment where she let go of her home sort of for a while until the mothers said, like, please get us out of here, apparently.
Yeah.
Did they approach? No, yeah, I was just wondering, did the mothers approach her, or did she approach the mothers?
In Fury Road, she said that they were begging her. That's all I know.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. I definitely wanted more resolution to the star map on the arm. Like Alicia said, the symbolism of her letting go of her original life and
I like that.
Yeah, it's great. But I feel like they did so much setup with that star map, and then to have it just be gone, it was a little like, well, what now?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it was. They did a lot of setup. They really did. There was at least 2 or 3 moments where we see it, or it's referred to. Jack asks her about it, I think, at one point, and then it's just gone. And so, can we talk a little bit about cinematography and special effects? How did you guys take the overall visual aesthetic of the movie? I got some thoughts, but I'm curious to what you guys did. It work for you? Did anything not work for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think if anything, it was slightly less oversaturated than Fury Road, and I think they could have amped up the saturation even more, but they did play well with the color, especially the color red, and it just kind of all looks like a desert fever dream to me, which is as it should. So for me, yes, it looks like it was filmed the way that it was filmed, but but for me that worked with the sort of mythic, sort of hazy setting. Yeah.
Right. And that plays into the otherworldliness, I guess, of this. Like it's separated from our reality because it is hyper and hazy and hot. You could feel the heat in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I think that for having a film completely set in an empty desert, that they made it very visually interesting. I was never looking at the screen feeling like I was bored or that I wanted more out of it. They did a great job of kind of keeping my eyes on the screen, even though it was such a desolate sort of landscape that they were in. Yeah,
nice. That's cool. I was wondering too about the filming style that George has developed over the years. And I'm glad I was able to get Road Warrior and Thunderdome in, because there's a thing that he did in the first movie. In I don't know that he does it in Thunderdome at all, but in the first two movies I think he might have done it more in Max, but I haven't watched Mad Max in a while. John and I covered it on Second Breakfast a while ago, but I wasn't paying attention to that this detail of the frame rate or the dropped frames issue, and then the way that he zooms and sort of does these camera movements. And I thought,
I'm not sure that he gets the credit for that. I think there's a cinematographer who's known for that, but I can't remember their name. So
sure, but he used it definitely effectively in Mad Max when they had no budget. And so a traveling camera with a zoom and then dropped frame rates gives you a like, whoa, like I really did just open up the nitrous oxide and the engine have taken off. But in this movie, it actually started to get in the way of my enjoyment because rather than it being a gonzo, we're making a movie with no budget and then the cops show up because we haven't filed permits, but then we turn the cameras on them and say, hey, do you guys want to be in a movie? And they're like, yeah, let's go. And so everybody's in and they're doing all this wacky stuff. To me, it almost feels like it's becoming a parody of itself. It's kind of jumping the shark a little bit.
Okay.
He's trying to create that style, but then in the trying, it becomes a little inauthentic and a little bit overused. And so that's one of the things that didn't work for me in the movie is that I could feel him doing it intentionally. Whereas when I was watching Road Warrior the other day, when he did it, I was like, oh, I understand why you're using that in this moment. It makes sense because of what you're trying to tell me from a visual storytelling standpoint. Whereas in this movie, it felt more like a flourish or like, hey, we're doing the thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. It didn't seem to affect either of you guys. You're just like,
I liked it. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think that feeling of it becoming a little bit of a parody of itself, maybe for me, I didn't mind it so much because I think of Mad Max as such a ridiculous franchise. So maybe that didn't bother me as much. What about you, Alicia?
I come to these movies expecting that. So, I guess it didn't register as something great for me, but it definitely didn't take me out. It was it's like, yep, this looks like a Mad Max movie.
Yeah, I have to go back and watch Fury Road to see how much he used it there. He barely used it, if at all, in Thunderdome. But then Thunderdome, there was only one big set piece vehicle chase, so it wasn't a lot of opportunity. Where in Road Warrior and in this, there's a lot of vehicle stuff, and I love bringing the camera like. Physically getting close to your subject with the camera while you're zooming is a really great effect. It really gives you the shock and awe of like being on the back of a war rig as it's being assaulted by a bunch of crazy people. Well, let's start start to think about wrapping up a little bit, I'm curious, Aaron, you've got some themes and ideas here that we haven't touched on yet. Furiosa as Angel of Death. What's that?
She sort of acts as like the Angel of Death in Dementis's case, this sort of grim reaper figure come to deliver him to the afterlife, which I think is very cool. Sometimes it's a malicious thing, sometimes it's peaceful in mythology. And the thing that I find most interesting about Furiosa kind of being a stand-in for the Angel of Death in this movie is the original Angel of Death comes from the Talmud and comes from demons who are associated with the apocalypse, the moral decline of mankind, and the fall of mankind. So really just hitting on every single theme of Mad Max with that comparison there.
Very cool.
And a little bit more on the nose, the History Man calls Furiosa the fifth rider of the apocalypse.
Oh, that's right.
So, yeah, we've got, pestilence, destruction, death, famine in popular.
Furiosa, yeah.
Yeah, and Furiosa, I guess she would be Fury or Vengeance, something like that. As the fifth rider.
Well, it's funny that that's her name as a child. I almost thought that was a name she took on as an adult, but to hear like her parents are like, oh, we're going to make our kid fierce.
Yeah. With her and Valkyrie, the people at the green place are like, we're going to give our kids some badass names here.
We're going to infuse them with badassness so they can defend their home.
No Jacks here.
No.
Elysia, did you get any Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes vibes at the beginning of the movie when she's reaching for the fruit? It reminded me of that
because with the egg stuff that they're doing. Yeah. Although I have to say I was holding my breath a lot through the Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes sequence and the opening Furiosa sequence, but that's also probably because I knew she wasn't going to die, obviously.
Right. Yeah. I think it's an interesting thing too in this whole world of prequels where we know the following story and now we're telling the preceding story. I think Better Call Saul was an amazing execution of this. Can we line the railway tracks up so that the train car can pass seamlessly from the after to the before? And I think they did a pretty good job with this one overall, and they gave us, I don't want to slide too far off into the Star Wars land, but like Solo tried to do this as well, but it just every time they gave us the Kessel Run stuff or the other member berries of things, it was a little too much on the nose. It was a little too obvious that they were winking. Oh, here, wink, wink. This is how this happens.
I love Solo for the record, but okay.
This felt really seamless in terms of lore building and history without being like, I don't know, maybe the claw arm montage was a little bit too much. Like, did we really need 5 minutes of her making the arm? I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of things they could have just shaved off a moment here or there to tighten it up.
Yeah. Well, on that note, too, let's talk a little bit about
what was Aaron about to... Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no. I didn't have anything else to say.
Okay. Well, let's dig in a little bit to what, to be a bit more specific, like what did work or what didn't work for you specifically in the movie. Elysia, do you have any things you want to call out?
I brought up a lot of it before, but like the speech really worked for me at the end. The just the fact that it felt more like I want a myth to not just be like they went to the green place, found the green place was gone, and then they came back like wah wah wah.
Right.
This gave me a meaty story, and this gave me, I love character work above all things, and this gave me a lot of that. I do think that we got a lot of arcs for not just for Furiosa, but also for the villains. So all of that did work for me. It's a fun ride. It's not like I think it might be in my top 10 of the year right now. Probably not by the end of the year, but it's a solid movie. Yeah.
Cool. Right on. Aaron, anything that specific that you want to call out that worked or didn't work for you?
Yeah, towards the end of the film, something that didn't work for me was the wild goose chase with Dementis across the desert, where he had his decoys and Furiosa kind of one by one went off and found each of them before finally getting to Dementis. I felt like she's already been chasing Dementis for so long that it it was kind of boring me a little bit at that point.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted her to get to him, have the confrontation, and have it end. But on a positive note with Dementis, I really loved his nomadic biker clan that was going across the desert. I always enjoy that type of group.
Oh, seeing the horde moving across the visuals. Yeah.
Yeah. Thinking of the Dothraki from Game of Thrones or something like that. Those types of factions always interest me.
Right. Very cool. I really liked, one of the things that really worked for me was Hemsworth, his portrayal of Dementis.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it worked. And he was gonzo in the way that we want a gonzo character, but he was also relatable in a lot of ways. He was clever, but then his arrogance was also his downfall. And, you could feel like when we see Gastown and what's going on there, like it's not a good situation. So he's a really bad manager, but as a tactician or a strategist to achieve a short-term goal, he's really good and very clever. And so I liked that dimensionality. And I think Hemsworth can play that.
I think Alyssa called him a trickster character, which
nice. Very cool. Yeah, that's good. A couple of things that didn't work for me were the chapter markers. I was like, did we need those? I don't know. I liked the idea. I thought that he was going to go with something, but then it kind of just didn't. By the time the later chapter markers came, I was like, do I care? Like, I'm not really sure. The time jumps also sometimes disoriented me, even though that they worked and I get it. But there was one where they sped up. What was it that flew off and got caught in a branch at the Citadel?
Her wig.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I had questions about that, but yeah.
And then they give us the time speed up, and it's like, okay. But then there's other time jumps and things. And then there was a narration, too.
Mm-hmm.
And the narration in Road Warrior is a very important. We don't have narration in, I think, either Mad Max nor Thunderdome. So they did it in here, and I'm not sure that it worked for me. So structurally, I got a little, I was like, you just don't need all this stuff. Just, we're smart enough to know that this is child, this is, teenage, and this is adult Furiosa. I don't know. It was a little bit frustrating at times. Least and most favorite moments. Elysia, what's you've mentioned a couple already, but just to clarify, did you have anything specific that we haven't talked about yet?
I mean, I guess just like the way that they used color in the film. It's not a specific moment, but there's a couple of times when it comes up. Maybe one of the key times is when they come across that war boy in the road, and I'm still not sure why he's just so willing to be like, hey, okay.
I took it because he had an arrow in his head, so he was feeling a little bit.
Fair enough. He was not feeling himself.
That was a funny scene, though.
Yeah. And then, and of course, Dementis being, the showman that he is, he rolls with it. He's like, this is a look. He's like, I'm going to rub it on myself. I'm going to rub it on my little G. I'm going to, which, by the way, I mean the little girl, not.
Yes.
Sorry. Although maybe, I don't know.
Right.
And least favorite, I did have like an issue with that whole wig thing. I'm like, why did she? So I guess the idea of her making a wig of her own hair is that she was going to wear it until she could slip off at the right time. And then the right time came because that guy tried to take advantage of her.
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of a weird.
It was a little confusing for me. And I don't know. And then why? It was there to show the passage of time with the little treelet growing through it. So I was a little, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Aaron, what do you got for least favorite?
Yeah. So one of my favorite moments, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but the Jack and Furiosa escape from the bullet farm. I thought that was a really fun action sequence.
Nice.
Call me a hater, but one of my least favorite moments was that quick, like 2-second Mad Max cameo. I was like, we didn't need that. This is her movie. Let her have this moment. We don't need him.
I didn't even notice it until it was pointed out to me.
Yeah, and then when I saw it, and I was like, well, that's the Interceptor. Oh, that has to be Max. And he doesn't engage. Okay, that's clearly a Max characteristic.
Mm-hmm.
But I do. I also like, did we need another thing that we could have not? The movie would have been perfectly fine if we had had that. And it would have actually saved a moment. And it's every time that he would give us a little something like that, that's more emotional energy that I have to devote to other things that are not Anya Taylor-Joy's performance of Furiosa, which is why I'm here for the movie. I'm here to see Anya Taylor-Joy tell the story of Furiosa.
Right. There were a lot of distractions from her story and her performance in the movie that didn't have to be there.
Right. I think for me, my least favorite sequence was the 40-day war stuff. It was confusing. It kind of mushed down. Did we really need it? And then the weird thing. So for 40 days, she was making her arm, and then she shows up at the end. I don't know. It just was. It lost cohesion for me with that. And my two favorite scenes, though, were the chase out of the green place. Like I said before, that was my favorite set piece, and I think that's my favorite sequence out of all of it because it had energy, it had focus. I knew where we were going. I understood what the stakes were, and it just felt very Road Warrior in all of the ways that I want, which is all this intense action. But it was very personal because it was mother and daughter against the horde, and as opposed to two groups of opposing forces fighting, the war rig people and whoever's attacking the war rig kind of stuff.
Right.
And then I really liked Dementus's final speech. But like I said before, I was exhausted by the time we got to it. And I just love the fact that he's like, you're me. You follow this through to your natural conclusion. We've lost people. You lost your mother. I lost my children. And we're not so different, you and I. And the lucidity and the clear-eyedness that he had in those statements, I found really refreshing for a bad guy. We talk sometimes about what makes a good bad guy, and what makes a good bad guy is somebody that you can relate to or understand their logic or their compelling, that they have some sort of compelling reason, not that they just want to twirl their mustache to twirl their mustache.
Yeah. There's sort of an interesting connection to the whole 40-day war and Dementus's death thing in the 2015 Mad Max tie-in game.
Oh, okay.
Where the main antagonist in that game is Immortan Joe's son named Scabrous Scrotus, who we see in the movie. He's the guy with the big forehead in that sequence. Okay. He goes around claiming that he was the one who kills Dementus in that game. So sort of an interesting tie-in, and maybe showing that he's a little bit dishonest and willing to take the credit for something he didn't do.
Liar, liar, forehead on fire.
Yep.
All right. Any other comps or shout outs that you want to make for this movie? I already called out Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, Dune 2, and Kill Bill. I have one other nerd alert that I already talked about a couple of the guns in the Internet Movie Firearm Database, but Dementus's gun is the same gun that the Man in Black in the Westworld television series uses. It's called a Lamat revolver, and it has a small bore shotgun chamber underneath its regular revolver chamber. And so this one has been modified and souped up, but I was I saw it when she loaded that. I was like, wait a minute, I know that gun. So anyway, AJ, any call outs you have?
Yeah, well, it wouldn't be a podcast with me on it without me yapping about Fallout for at least a little bit.
Fair enough.
So Mad Max is a lot of the inspiration for the Fallout series, and specifically the aesthetic, like the leather armor, the sawed-off shotgun, the blue healer that Max has with him in the second Mad Max movie is the inspiration for the dog named Dogmeat in all of the Fallout games.
Okay.
Oh, no way.
So, yeah. Okay. And there's some cool Mad Max references in the achievements for the games. Like they have the Master Blaster Master armor from Thunderdome in the Pit DLC in Fallout 3. They've got a chance encounter with a character in Fallout 3 called Mel, and he looks exactly like Mel Gibson and is dressed like Mad Max. So there's just endless references like that in the series.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when we talk about post-apocalyptic storylines, Mad Max is the key cornerstone, isn't it? For the genre.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's so influential.
Yeah. And I think Alicia's got a specific call out as well.
Yeah. I mean, I love some wacky movies. And one that really stands out when I was rewatching these Mad Max movies, I was like, I have to go back and rewatch Doomsday from 2008.
I've never heard of it.
And this is the problem. More people need to know about this and watch this batshit movie. It is, it starts out as like, I wrote on Twitter, it has 4 acts. It starts out as 28 weeks later, and then it turns into Beyond Cannibal Dome. And then it becomes this like Lord of the Outlander situation in a castle. And then it becomes the Fast and the Road Warrior.
Okay.
and then it ends with like the main character's name is Eden, and then it ends with like Eden Impossible. And it's just it's an absolutely crazy movie, but it actually holds together pretty well. Like it's early, or late noughties, 2008 exposition dump, but the exposition is actually some pretty decent world building. Like it all makes sense. And I only care about the one hero though. And then there's someone else you meet later. But there's like vicious villains. Yeah.
Nice.
I'm adding that one to my watch list.
Very good. I see we've got a note here from you, Alicia, as well as for a power ranking for
I was wanting
movies.
I just have to say about Doomsday, by the way, if anyone has seen the quote-unquote sequel to Train to Busan called Peninsula is a total rip-off of Doomsday. Anyway.
Wait, there's a sequel to Train to Busan?
It is the same director, but it feels like a completely different movie. It feels like he watched Doomsday and was like, I want to make that film.
Okay.
But so it's like them going back into Korea with Korea being under a zombie quarantine,
That's a banger of a movie.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The first one's very good. Yeah. But yeah,
go ahead.
Oh no, that I was just going to say about ranking the 5 films.
Okay. I was going to ask, have either of you seen, is it The Kingdom or Kingdoms? I think it's The Kingdom on Netflix. That's, feudal Korea.
Yeah, I think it's just called Kingdom. I haven't watched it yet, though.
Oh, it's so good.
Either.
It's so good. And then they released this little standalone, like almost short, little movie. Is it a movie or is it a TV show kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think 2 seasons. And then I was like, okay, season 3, let's go. This is so good. It's one of my favorite zombie genre series of all. I thought it was because it's all. There's so much politics and feudal politics going on, and the heir and the wife and the children and the stand-up leaders versus the not so great leaders, village life. It just encompasses all of that kind of stuff with zombies, and it's great. Anyway,
that's awesome.
All right, so power ranking. Yeah. So for me, Thunderdome is number 5. And I almost would want to take Thunderdome out of the rankings because, when I watched it last night, the thing that really occurred to me is this is a musical. It's the only thing that it's not a musical is that they're not singing, but otherwise the drama and they use music intensely.
Maybe that's why I like it. Yeah. Well, they had Tina Turner, and of course they're going to use her in the soundtrack.
Eating the scenery in that. Yeah. I love her outfit. I love her. She's awesome. But it is so over the top melodramatic, and it's very story. It's a very different film from all of the other preceding ones. So I almost want to say it doesn't belong in my power rankings. But that's why it's at 5 because it's just kind of standalone. But there's a good movie. There's a lot of good stuff in there. Mm-hmm. It just is a little, I don't know. It's wacky. Then I would have to go number 4 is Mad Max, the original film. It's a very slow, dry story. And I think it's a really important sequel. I don't think if I were to say to people, go out and watch movies in this particular order, I would say almost watch Mad Max later in your watch order. Don't try to watch it first and then watch the progression. Like watch Road Warrior and then go back maybe and watch Mad Max to get the start. And then I haven't, because I didn't get the chance to see Furiosa or Fury Road before we did this podcast. I can't decide which is number 2 and number 3, Furiosa or Fury Road. I don't know, because I need a fresh take on Fury Road before I could rank the two. So they're right there together. And then, of course, for me, and it's a pure nostalgia pick. You know, Road Warrior is the perfect gonzo, George Miller, wacky, imagine early 80s, seeing somebody in a mohawk.
Characters, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Humongous. They're just the iconography of the Mad Max world, the leather, the black leather armor, the sawed-off shotgun. All of these things are just so entrenched in my memory that I'm making a pure, say what you want. The story is cohesive. It's very clear. It's very straightforward. So for all of those choices, it's my number 1.
Okay. What about you, Aaron?
Well, so I'm almost completely the opposite as David here.
Nice. Very cool.
I would put Thunderdome at my number 1. Complete nostalgia pick. Complete nostalgia pick. It was my first Mad Max movie, so
yeah,
right on.
Blinded a little bit.
That was my Road Warrior is my first Mad Max. Yeah. So yeah, I get it.
Yeah. I would put Road Warrior at number 2. Then I would actually put Furiosa right in the middle. I thought this was a really solid entry into the franchise. I put that at my number 3. Then the first Mad Max, and last is Fury Road for me.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's fair.
Wow.
All right.
If
I'm starting at the bottom, Mad Max, the original, is the first one I saw, but it's at the bottom for the reasons we've discussed. Fury Road is second to last. It's maybe the most visually stunning, but it gave me kind of like the least. It gave me even less than, it holds together more than the original Mad Max, but it has less going on under the hood, if that makes sense. And then, so in the middle, I'm going to put Thunderdome, which I would have ranked higher before the rewatch, but now I'm like, okay, I can admit the other films are better. And then, it's close for me between Road Warrior and Furiosa, because I do think Road Warrior has like a more satisfying, self-contained movie story. I think when I think of the characters, I think especially of like the Wolf Boy and the pilot guy.
Yes. Classic characters. Yeah. Feral child.
Yeah. But Furiosa is, has the advantages of being more modern and doing things because of that way. But I think I'm going to put Furiosa second and Road Warrior first, and then Doomsday to rule them all.
Good ranks. Cool. It's really interesting. I love that, because we've all come to this franchise in these slightly different ways, and I love that the franchise can appeal to us in these different for these different reasons. And I don't know. I really hope that George can make something. We need some editing on that. Keep the story tighter. I don't know. That's sort of my final summation thought. I don't know, Aaron. Any sort of wrap up? Where are you at with the franchise?
I would agree with that. I hope that we do get more entries, like you said, tighten it up just a little bit. But other than that, I'm hoping that they continue with this. It's iffy with the perceived bad box office. But I think that there's some more interesting stories to tell.
For sure. Elysia?
I think if it were slightly shorter, the box office would have done better, because I think there are a lot of people who look at runtimes now and are like, movies are just getting too long. And it is true. I feel like this one was about the same runtime as Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, but Kingdom, I felt like it justified its runtime with a really solid story that took you on a whole journey, which this did to a certain degree, but not quite as much for me. So this one felt a lot longer. So it really depends. But filmmakers need to look at themselves hard in the mirror and ask the question more, can I cut a little more?
Yeah.
Because I can say as a writer, it's very hard to cut your darlings, but yeah.
Yeah, and that's why you have editors that are not you, right? That can make those choices.
Right.
Yeah, and anecdotally, as a data point of one, I absolutely would have seen this on opening weekend if it were not the time commitment. So, but I know there's a lot more going on in the industry as well. So let's take a quick break, and then when we come back, we've got some feedback that we want to consider and respond to. We've got a voicemail and a couple of other messages, and then we'll talk about our programming schedule and what we've got going on for... And we're back. So we've got some feedback that we want to consider. And Elysia, you got to actually have a mini meet with one of our listeners with Elisa.
Yeah, she lives in the Netherlands. So we went to see Furiosa together.
That's a lot of fun.
We had lunch.
That's
Great.
Awesome.
Great. Well, she sent us in a voicemail, so let's listen to that now.
Hi, Lorehounds. Elisa from The Hague in Holland. I'm a longtime listener since the first ring of Power Pods. I saw Furiosa this past weekend, and now that I've had a few days to think about it, I'm calling in with some feedback. In general, I really enjoyed it. It visually sucks you in. There are parts in the middle, the Bullet Town section, that got a bit confusing and slowed the pacing a bit. But if you let it wash over you, you'll get sucked right back in and caught up in the action. I think the first thing that struck me about the film was the artistry of the cinematography, which makes this film a spectacular and spectacle as well as gorgeous film. Although I don't know if there's any controversy, but I really like the super saturated color and color palette. It might not be to everybody's taste. Since then, I've also read that the scenery was a bit CGI enhanced, but it does show what a beautiful result you can get. It didn't bother me at all. Additionally, I also liked just how the use of color was integrated into the storytelling. For example, Dementis went from white to red to gray to black. Or when the camera focused on the red fruit in the beginning, it reminded me of Spielberg's use of the red to draw the audience's attention. For example, what were we to think about Furiosa reaching for that fruit? I want to discuss the acting and the characters, but before I do, I want to mention the mise en scène, the incredible props, costumes, and sets that all contributed to creating this amazing world. Everything was so rich with detail, which added another level to the visual experience and the storytelling and the world building. There was also an interesting style. I'm not sure if it was the way it was filmed or the way it was edited. It was also used in Fury Road. It created an almost comic book feel. I felt this the most during the action sequences. Every now and then there would be a frame that looked almost as if it was frozen within the chaos, or maybe a frame was taken out. I'm not sure exactly how it was done, but I really just loved it. And speaking of the action sequences, the one long sequence involving the road war with the rig, that was 15 minutes long. It used 200 stunt people, and it took 78 days to film. That just blows me away. Switching back to the characters, firstly, I thought in general the acting was wonderful. Both of the Furiosa actresses, Alea Brown, I could be saying that wrong, as the child Furiosa, and Anna Taylor-Joy, they were both very good. They had a heavy load as they needed to rely primarily on their physicality and the facial expressions because they had so little dialogue. They both did an admirable job, and so much of it was done with those amazing eyes. But I do have to admit that the actor who held my interest the most was Chris Hemsworth and his portrayal of Dementis. We're so used to seeing him as the hero in the Marvel films and in general, and he's actually amazing as a villain. He played him on a lot of levels. There was even humor in there. But more importantly, even though we don't see it, we knew that he was a villain with a backstory and even a broken heart. In fact, you saw the choice of him wearing the stuffed bunny on his chest. You could see it as his carrying his ripped out heart on his, not on his sleeve, but literally, but carrying his heart outside for all to see. He's an interesting character, mostly because he's not just a two-dimensional villain. When we're introduced to him, although he's holding Furiosa as captive, he's also keeping her safe among the rogues in his group. And you start to see and you know that he is trying to replace and to use her to replace the loss of his own child. In the end, he even evokes a sort of parental pride when he sees what she's become and tries to link the two of them. You know, you've become just like, you're just like me, as any parent would do. So all in all, I think that the Dementis character and the Helmsworth portrayal was really one that I think I would say would be one of the high points of the film for me. Which also, I mentioned the last scene, which was probably my favorite scene, the last scene with the two of them. That was just a point where it brought everything into focus. And I could go on, but I think the feedback's getting a little bit long. So just a few points before I finish off. At that end scene, where once Furiosa had incapacitated Dementis, she cuts off the stuffed rabbit. And then you have to ask, why did she do that? If she hated Dementis, obviously though she wanted revenge against him, why did she take the rabbit? Could it hold any good memories? Why would she want it? Again, there's a thought. And another thing that I'm rolling around, it's never directly addressed. And although you could say it was treated subtly, although this film does nothing subtly, she loses her arm. Now that's obviously at that point, you see that it's the culmination of her story of becoming the Furiosa we come to know later. But when she loses the arm, and it's also the arm with the tattoo. So what does that mean? Is there any significance in the fact that she lost the arm that had the route home, the way home? Although you know that she would have known that by heart, looking at it every single day, the fact that, and she would have had it memorized in her head. Is there something that's being said also in the fact that she has now truly been cut off from who she was and ever going back? And is this something else that Dementis took from her? There's a lot more I could say, again, about weaknesses, plus and minuses, but I'll wrap it up here by saying it might not be a perfect film, but it is a good film. It's worth a watch. And I think it's a great addition to the Mad Max saga.
Thanks, Elysia. That's great feedback. Really thoughtful. I think you're right in that this movie provokes a lot of thinking, and wherever you end up on, did I enjoy it or not? There's a lot of richness here. Elysia, anything that jumped out at you in Alicia's?
Just a lot of really insightful points also
Agreed.
About Dementis as, a father figure and the softer side to him. And one thing that sticks with me is what she asked about when Furiosa cut the bear off of him. And I think she knew, because I knew when Dementis went down at that moment, he obviously was playing fake, he's playing dead. And I think she knew that as well. So was she trying to provoke him, or was there a sentimental move in this, taking the bear?
Yeah, the whole father-daughter relationship is something that we didn't actually get into.
Because we have no idea what her real father was like. We just know her mother. Yeah.
True.
I think that stuffed animal was definitely some emotional comfort for her for the time that she was with Dementis. You see her holding on to it, and it became more than just the toy Dementis gave her. It became this sort of emotional support little teddy bear for her. It was one of the rare good things from her time with Dementis' clan. Yeah.
It's true. One of the other things that we didn't ever really dig into was the tree and what she does with Dementis at the end. How were you guys, what did you guys think of that? Was that, I mean, I know we touched on the revenge question a little bit, but was that as an ending for a villain? How did that grow on you?
I really liked it. I actually have a little production note about that. In the original concept art for Fury Road, when they were designing the Citadel, originally the gardens of the Citadel was supposed to be entirely dead bodies that were having crops grow out of them. Oh. So they took that concept from Fury Road and did that with Dementis in this movie.
Okay.
Interesting. Well, it makes sense to use that as a resource, right? To grow your crops.
Yeah.
And I like the symbolism of her choosing this, because it is, on the one hand, it's like a really horrible way to die, respect to Bronn and the others, the other green seers of the Song of Ice and Fire universe. But yeah, it just seems like a very especially painful way to die. But at the same time, so it's vengeance. We talked about that. But at the same time, she's using him to make something from home grow where it wouldn't otherwise. Mm-hmm. So she is turning this death into something productive.
And she's taking her trauma and creating something nourishing out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. That's a good one. All right, we've got 3 messages next up. We've got Lore Master and Dunadan Extraordinaire, Adrian. He says, Dearest Lorehounds, I wanted to get something in before recording, but I'm under a work deadline, so bullet points will have to do. Well, you made it in time.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, Furiosa was good. Not great, not bad. A solid B- effort from George Miller. What could have elevated that score and maybe its box office? ? Editing. The movie felt too long for what it eventually did. The story arcs are all there. They just need a nip and tuck. The big Australian knife, insert relevant 2024 Paul Hogan quote here. I'm not going to try to do my Australian accent. I don't want to offend. I've actually spent time in Australia, and it doesn't go well when you try to imitate their accent and you do it poorly. Motivation. This is ultimately a revenge story, in my humble opinion, and yet I didn't feel satisfied at the end. Sure, it was poetic and beautiful, and the line about making it epic, chef's kiss, but that bloodlust we all want in revenge stories was unsatisfied, and the path to get there meandered so much, even the poetry at the end was lost in a sea of how much longer is this movie?
So I laughed because I read his thing before you said
it. which is my point too, right? I was by the time I got this great poetic ending, I was exhausted. Okay, that's all for now. Meeting beckons. Keep on, keeping on. And then he sent me a Rickroll GIF because I made a comment about something that in case you know. No, if you know. I didn't know what the IYKYK meant. And so we had a funny joke on the Discord about that. And I felt Rickrolled. So appropriately so. Any thoughts, Aaron, on Adrian's email?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I completely agree with Adrian that could have been shorter. They needed to edit it down quite a bit more.
Yeah, 2 hours minimum, or 2 hour maximum. Like that's where it should have been. So
agreed.
All right, next up is Abby.
Wait, I thought I had something that I just thought of. That I like to watch things in timeline order, even if the movies come out of order. And now the end of this movie kind of ruins Fury Road. The only mystery about Fury Road is the fact that the women are in that war machine.
So that was a thing that I had listed as something that didn't work for me, and I forgot to mention it. What did you guys make of the credit scenes, the clip package that they put into the credit scenes from Fury Road? Did that work for you or not?
I didn't feel it was necessary. I think that they could have just had the credits roll as normal. I think they felt a little bit pressured to maybe do the Marvel thing and have some post-credit scenes or post-credit pictures going on in the background.
Well, I think it's cool. The one thing... Okay, so this credit scene where they kind of recap Fury Road, that seems like
the whole movie, yeah.
Yeah, that seems like, and now why am I even ever going to watch Fury Road again? But the one cool like little Easter egg they put it in the credits is that little bird skull thing that what's his face from Fury Road had. The war boy who switched sides.
Knox, I think.
Yeah, Knox, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They showed his little bird skull thing. Knox, you're right, it's Knox, yeah. So what does that mean?
Yeah, good question. But yeah, I don't understand why they... Anyway, again, editing. Editing was necessary. All right, next up is Abby. Abby just came out of the cinema, opening day there. She lives in Japan. To be honest, I am not mad about this franchise. So not excited. Mad being excited or interested. Well, the positives. It was great cinematography, amazing action scenes. Unlike Fury Road, it had a plot and a progression, more fleshed out characters. This is sure a movie to experience in theater on a big screen with the best sound and visuals, and the sound and visuals are the main selling points. I'd be interested to know how they make those shots where everyone's eyes are shiny like that. Good question. Probably in post. They probably do up a lot of whitening in post. Yeah, there is that one scene with Anya Taylor-Joy where her eyes are just piercing bright lights out of the dark. Question, is this supposed to be Australia? Yes, this is supposed to be Australia. Fun fact, I don't know, personal anecdote, fun fact, where's the line? That Road Warrior, the second movie, was filmed in an area called Monday, which is near Broken Hill. And I actually spent some time out there. I actually worked on a ranch not far from Broken Hill. And I actually saw the Pursuit Interceptor before it got sold off and moved. We were driving through this town, and I was like, wait a minute, that's the Pursuit car.
Oh, cool.
As we drove by. But it's really like that out there. It's just dry scrubland and just goes on for miles and miles and miles. And Broken Hill is an interesting place because that's where opals, one of the places where opals are mined. And a lot of people live in Hobbit style homes where they've dug into the mountainside or the hillsides and stuff and live inside of earthed out places because it's just kind of hot there. So anyway, continuing Abby's email, what didn't work for me particularly was the main cast. Oh, okay, interesting. Anya was okay, if a bit too pouty at times. Hemsworth was just extremely annoying. Sorry if that was the intention, it worked. Loved the young version of Furiosa and her mom. Tom Burke was excellent as Jack. As lately as I'm a bit bored by action flicks in general, at least it kept me awake almost to the end. Almost. Was it a bit long? It was a bit long, wasn't it? All right, so we have some detraction with Hemsworth and Anya Taylor-Joy. Maybe it was one of those things. Well, I don't mean to second guess Abby's criticisms, but I know if there is a movie that's long or not working for me, I'll tend to nitpick on things that maybe are normally gloss over. But I can.
But if they captivated her, she wouldn't feel it so long. Although that seems to be the general agreement. Everyone thinks it's a bit long. Yeah, I
think it's one thing a lot of people agree on is in this. Great.
Yeah.
All right. Any thoughts on Abby's final thoughts?
I'll disagree a little bit. I liked Hemsworth's portrayal, but
as we talked.
Other than that, completely agree with the criticism of the length again.
And wrapping us up, Sub-Zero on the Discord said, just saw it yesterday and really enjoyed it. I still like Fury Road better. All right, power ranking there. But this was a solid addition to the universe. Some thoughts. Surprise, surprise. The movie was a bit too long. I think it should have just been 3 chapters. I don't disagree with the chapter. I think if the chapters markers would have worked better if it had been not as many chapters.
Right.
Young Furiosa's rise to the ranks and becoming a badass, and the climax. I did like her character development. The movie could have been more streamlined. The girl who played young Furiosa was excellent. Okay, so another point that we can all agree on. It was too long, and young Furiosa, the actor was great. And I liked her more than Anya Taylor-Joy as adult Furiosa. Okay, Interesting. ATJ was fine, but didn't really pop for me. I would rank her 3rd amongst the Furiosas that we've seen so far. Wow.
Okay.
All right. Continuing, I know some didn't like Hemsworth, but I thought he was a lot of fun. He was intentionally over-the-top cartoonish, a 2D comic book villain. Mad Max villains have always been about flair over substance. Dementis had plenty of flair. By the way, my wife couldn't get over the fake nose. She thought it looked distractingly fake. I didn't mind it, although I thought it was unnecessary.
Same.
Something we didn't talk about was the nose, and certainly we had some nose controversy last year with Maestro. And
right. But then he was copying someone, but then exaggerating it. But this is, I agree. I didn't think it was necessary, but it didn't bother me.
Yeah, I noticed it because we zoomed in on it when he turned his face, and then after that, I kind of forgot about it. So
clearly, I'm not very observant because I didn't notice it at all.
One thing I didn't notice, which Elisa mentioned in her voicemail, was the color shift that Dementis goes through. I didn't realize he went from sort of gray to black. That was a really interesting comment, and I didn't notice that. I mean, I noticed a couple of times with color, like the peach being very red and that kind of stuff. But I think that's really interesting that George was intentionally using color as part of his visual storytelling. And then Dementis in the white at the beginning with this purity of his, that was very striking. Although in Road Warrior, it's very funny too, because the refinery crew, they're all in white hockey and lacrosse gear. It's like, okay, a little bit on the nose there. All right, Sub-Zero continues. As expected, the cinematography and score were bang on. It's the reason why you have to see capitalized to see Mad Max in a theater. Okay, big screen, small screen. We're pretty split here. A lot of people are definitely big screen proponents. It was great to see a lot of the side characters from Fury Road return for the prequel. I cheered when the creepy guitar player showed up.
Yeah.
We saw that. And Tom Burke was great as Jack. I really like
another
him.
universal point.
Yeah. And then, of course, Immortan Joe's whole family and all of that weirdness. I don't know where the Mad Max saga goes from here, but I'm down for whatever comes next. Again, something else that I think we can all agree on, that we want to see some more from the franchise. Very cool. Thanks, everyone, for writing in and sending in your voicemails. We always like to hear from the community. We are a very human-centered community here with the Lorehounds. Algorithms are tools, but I don't know. I don't think there's any substitute for human experience, sharing human experience to human experience. And I think that's something we like to pride ourselves on this podcast and in this community. Speaking of which, I think we can start to wrap it up here. If you are interested in supporting the community, then join us on Supercast or Patreon. Supercast, we kind of prefer. We get a little bit better margin, and it's a tool that's a little bit better built for podcasters. But I know Patreon is very easy, and it's something that we're all very familiar with. Also consider that, for the subscription price, you're getting great value. We're adding more features to the subscriber benefits. And we've just launched a whole new second podcast, Elysia, with 11sies, which is a subscriber-only benefit. It's one of two.
Film reviews.
It's a whole film review thing that we do where you guys get to Elysia, John, and I get to pick movies, present them to each other, and then you guys get to pick of the final three. And then we'll talk about it. And we spent a good hour plus talking about Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. That was a really good conversation.
Yeah. So this month we have, what is it? We have Fifth Element, we have Princess Bride, and we have Everything Everywhere All at Once to vote on.
There is a theme in those three movies. That's really interesting. The way that when it's presented boiled down like that, that's pretty good. Yeah. Anyway, we're going to have a Patreon poll and Supercast poll up very soon for our subscribers to pick those movies. Last thing I'll say about it too is consider an annual subscription. Same on both Supercast and Patreon, same prices, same everything. But it's when you look at the value that you guys are getting over the time for the year, the amount of podcasts that we're putting out, it's a pretty awesome value. And annual subscriptions are a great way to lock that in. Again, you get early episodes, ad-free, and all of that good stuff. Show guides, all the different show guides that we're putting together, Rings of Power, for House of the Dragon. And as well, we have our Discord. Aaron, you're actually one of our mods on the Discord, one of our team members there. Yeah.
Yeah. Would you like me to give some of the Discord
Sure, you punch
points?
It up. Yeah, let folks know about what we've got going on over there.
Yeah, so over on Discord, we've got a pretty fun and welcoming community with channels set up for different shows and projects. It's a really great place to meet and converse with others who have similar interests. As David said, I am a part of the mod team over there, along with Adrian, Brian 8063, and some help from Josh the Black. And the link to that is going to be in the show notes, and it's open to everyone, but there's some additional channels just for subscribers.
Yeah, I think one of the great things about the Discord is that it's that virtual water cooler space for us. Right? We get to talk and nerd out, and it's not all the noise of Twitter or what's the Instagram version of it, or the threads or Blue Sky, but we get a really great community to talk with each other and be humans and enjoy our hobbies. Because I think one of the things that binds us most in the Lorehounds is our love of television and movies and books, even to a degree.
Yeah.
And being able to have a space where we can talk with each other about stuff.
Well, it's nice to be able to talk about stuff without having to worry about, bad faith, sexist arguments or whatever.
Yeah,
exactly.
Everyone over on the Discord in that community is just... Everyone's so willing to have friendly conversations and talk about the things that they love. No one's slinging mud at you for your opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing that we have never had to once enforce any sort of
Okay, I'm knocking on all the wood right now.
Yeah, exactly. Touch all the wood. But I think that's great because the value, the community itself is holds and represents those values. And so even if we did have an incident, it would be an outlier, somebody who just sort of was passing by and decided to throw some mud rather than our community as a whole just being so cool and supportive. Let's talk a little bit about our programming. Aaron, you want to mention what you've got going on with Radioactive Ramblings?
Yeah, absolutely. So Radioactive Ramblings, we currently have a Fallout lore series going on, and those episodes are dropping every Monday. So tune in for that. We're just wrapping up our Origins episodes, and we're going to be getting into some of the mainline games and stories. So we're excited to cover that. Got some Elden Ring lore coming as well in the lead up to the DLC, and last but certainly not least, Season 4 of The Boys coverage coming in June.
I'm so glad that you guys stepped up to cover the Boys. We were happy to let that one go between House of the Dragon and the Acolytes, and of course John and Alicia are doing continuing with Doctor Who. It was just, and then the Bear. We were just like, oh my God, it is. And to have your help there is great. And then hopefully John and I will be able to pop on every once in a while and chat with you guys about it. So
absolutely.
Elysia, we'll shift dust. Beacon 23 season 2.
Yeah,
where are we at?
Just wrapped up. So right before we recorded this, I recorded the season wrap up with Luke. But then there's also going to be an episode coming up in a couple weeks where I'm interviewing at least Glenn Mazzaro, the showrunner of season 2, co-showrunner of season 2.
Great. Congratulations.
Hopefully the other one as well. We're still working that out. And yeah, so we're going to do a wrap up with that. And then we're getting back into Dune. We'll discuss details.
Excellent.
About starting with the book, one piece at a time.
Very cool. And of course, we'll talk about Lorehounds programming because you've got stuff.
Yeah, and also the Star Wars Complete Canon Timeline.
Right, yes.
The Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast just finished the pre-Acolyte Blitz, as I said earlier. So if you want like all the background on Star Wars history leading into the Acolyte, we just ended that with an episode that's a preview of the Acolyte, the characters, and things that to set the stage for the show that begins in just a couple days.
I need to listen to that before we start. I've normally been saving the canon timeline for house chores where I can just, I've got a lot of stuff to do and I can just, give my brain that fun enjoyment to learn the timeline a little bit more.
It's been my Metro listen recently.
Oh,
nice.
Good.
Yes.
Yeah,
I really like too how you're approaching it, and you're kind of playing with the structure of podcasts themselves a little bit, and the way that you're ordering things. So
so check out if you're not familiar. Then there's a short Start Here episode at the top of the podcast. It's only 17 minutes on normal speed, which I listen on double. But
do you really do 2x?
I do 2x for pretty much everything.
I can't do more than 1.5. That's
okay. Sometimes I have to go back and slow it down to catch a word someone said.
Right.
But anyway, that lays out this experiment that I'm doing in form with the podcast in terms of making the timeline.
All right. What else we got? Rings and Rituals. Marilyn Arpakila, our favorite Tolkien scholar, and her colleague, Dr. Sarah Brown at Signum University, are doing an analysis of season 1 of Rings of Power through the lens of ritual. They just released I think episode 9, Udun, which is a really good one. So check that out. We also have Properly Howard movie reviews with Steve and Anthony. They are doing their season. They go by seasons, or they have a thematic season. And they're doing Felonies and Fugazis. And it has been a riot. They've covered Point Break, Shakedown, Tango and Cash, Pulp Fiction, Grosse Point Blank. They got a bunch more coming. So check them out. They usually drop on Mondays. And then with the Lorehounds main feed, we are stepping in, and John and I are about to record episodes, our recap of season 1 of House of the Dragon and episodes 9 and 10. And then we're going to be doing that episode by episode. Elysia, you and John are covering The Acolyte.
Mm-hmm.
And that starts this week. So that's going to be exciting. And then we've got The Boys at the end of June. We just got news that Pachinko Season 2 is coming. Yay, finally.
Yay.
At the end of summer.
Yeah.
Rings of Power at the end of summer. So it's a lot.
Yeah.
Stay tuned, and we're going to have a good one. Lorehound shout-outs. Elysia, do you want to give a shout-out to our Discord server boosters?
Sure. So thank you to our Discord server boosters who make Discord a more fun and functional place. And that would be Gnarls, Aaron K, Tiller the Thriller, Dork of the Ninjas, Doove71, and Captain Gingy 56.
And our lore masters. Hey, you want to do a split one? Maybe we'll split it at 19. I'll go up to 19. We've never done this before, so we'll give it a try. Samartian, Michael G, Michelle E, David W, Brian P, Nick W, SC, Peter OH, Bettina W, Adam S, Nancy M, Doove71, Brian 8063, Frederick H, Sarah L, Gareth C, Eric F, Matthew M, Sarah M,
DJ Miwa, Andra B, Kwang Yu, Deadeye Jedi Bob, Nathan T, Alex V, Aaron T, Sub-Zero, Aaron K, Dali V, Mothership 61, Gnarls, and Adrienne. Always may he be last.
Thank you all so very much for your support. Those are our top tier subscribers, our lore masters. Thank you to everyone who subscribes. Thank you to everyone who listens, no matter how you listen and no matter what you can, whether you subscribe or not, we don't mind. We're just glad that you're here with us. Join us on the Discord. And Aaron, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you guys for having me. This was a fun conversation.
Yes,
pleasure.
It was.
Yeah. And Elysia, I'll catch you on the next one.
The Lorehounds podcast is produced and published by the Lorehounds. You can send questions and feedback and voicemails at thelorehounds.com/contact. Get early and ad-free access to all Lorehounds podcasts at patreon.com/thelorehounds. Any opinions stated are ours personally and do not reflect the opinion of or belong to any employers or other entities. Thanks for listening.